I'm nervous, and my dad told me that when you're nervous, you should picture everyone naked. But my grandmother's here, so any other suggestions are always welcome. In university, I was that girl that every friend group has. You know, that one that wants to be a doctor. And I was the worst kind. I wanted to work for Doctors Without Borders, and I idolized aid workers, which is how I ended up in East Africa in the summer of 2012. I was working on a health education project for 2 months in Western Kenya. But when that wrapped up, I found myself stranded in Uganda with nothing to do, which is, I think, why I didn't ask many questions when a friend of a friend of a friend invited me along to northern Uganda with them. They were running a workshop on how to build water filters. Basically, you know, with a column of concrete that you fill with gravel and sand, and it filters out viruses and bacteria. And I was like, these seem kind of like my kind of people. So later that week, I throw my backpack in a van and I go up to meet them. And as I'm pulling up the driveway, I realize that I haven't really asked any questions about who these people are. And when I hop out, it's clear that that question is going to be answered very quickly. White button-up shirts, perfectly pressed pants, missionaries. I had agreed to spend the next week with missionaries. And what brought me to East Africa was a very different kind of evangelizing. I had just spent the last 2 months teaching health education in schools in Western Kenya. We had co-developed a curriculum with a local grassroots NGO and vetted it with our university professors, and then we're piloting it. So what this really meant is that I had spent the last 2 months struggling through a language barrier to answer every sex-related question that the teenage brain can come up with. And the best part of my day was the end of it, when students in our classroom would take out a piece of paper and a pen and write down questions they had. And we would take them home, and we would take them out, and we would unfold them, and we would read them. Can you use a freezy wrapper as a condom? Why/why not? How do you sex a mouth? Or my favorite, from a student who had clearly had it up to here with us, why are you Canadians so interested in sex? So just weeks after standing in front of classrooms, trying not to laugh while I talked about oral sex and the mechanics of threesomes, I found myself loading Bibles into the back of a trunk. So we get on the road, and it's this single-track road up the Nile, across, and towards the border with South Sudan. And I start to get to know my new companions a little better. There's Jess, a Texan who's engaged to a Canadian, and thinks that just knowing about ketchup chips and poutine makes us best friends. There's Mike, who shows me the vials of essential oils that he keeps on him at all times. He's decided that a few drops of lavender oil and a moment of prayer will do more for most illnesses than modern medicine. And then there's Trevor, our in-country host, who tells us stories about the crusades, as he calls them, that he's led on his 17 years in Uganda. And the thing about missionary work in Uganda and in East Africa in general is that there's this long, complicated history that dates back to the first Europeans to show up. And Christian conversion has often looked a lot more like systematic disenfranchisement and the theft of African land and resources. Today, there are preachers whose views are condemned as hate speech in North America, but who go on these sold-out speaking tours of Uganda, and if you drive along any highway, you'll see billboards advertising their upcoming speaking dates. And these people that we learned about and we demonized in global development classes, they were real, and they were here, and they were singing "You Too" at the top of their lungs. And I've never been as quiet as I was for the next week. I took the book that I was reading, God is Not Great, pushed it to the bottom of my bag, And I borrowed a Bible to join in Bible study instead. And when we started to sing hymns before every workshop that we gave, I mouthed, watermelon, 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 and hoped that no one would catch me. And at the end of the day, I would hand out Bibles with the rest of them and say goodnight. And on our last day there, Mike, who was also a videographer, was gathering footage to put together a video for his church back home. And he was running out of camera battery, so he was picking his shots very carefully. You know, how do I find the saddest child? How do I find the shabbiest looking home? And his audience was his church, but it felt to me like they were the same as those World Vision videos and those Doctors Without Borders videos that I'd watched. And he wasn't that far off from my idols. I declined their offer to join them on safari, took a bus back down to Kampala on my own, and stayed as far away from volunteering as I could for the rest of the summer. Today, I sell software. But when I think back to this trip, there's this conversation I had that at the time just went right over my head, but now feels weirdly prophetic. We had these bound printed copies of our sex ed manuals that we took from class to class, and we were leaving them behind at the end so that the teachers and students would have access to them year-round. And there was this one student, Solomon, who we got to know really well, and he came with us in the last week as we said our goodbyes and dropped off these books. And he was walking us home at the end of that night, and he turned to us and he asked us a question that still sticks with me. He said, you know, for years, people have been coming here, and they've been pointing at Bibles, and they've been saying, trust in this, and it will change your life. But not a lot has changed. And now you're coming here with these books, and you're pointing to them, and you're saying, trust in them, because they will change your life. But what's the difference between you and them? And to be honest, I still can't tell you.